Hello, I'm candidate number 2556, and I'm going to be talking about reducing the environmental impact of deforestation. The problem. Deforestation is the process of flattening large swaths of forest area for various purposes, that being agricultural production, creation of urban environments, or timber. Around the world, around 10 million hectares are cut down each year, with only half of that being reforested, which means we're permanently losing 5 million hectares each year. Deforestation is harmful because it destroys habitats. It ruins habitats for these animals, and that that reduces the biodiversity of Earth, and it also worsens the effects of soil erosion, making it worse for plants' biodiversity. And around 80% of deforestation is caused by agricultural production, which ties me into my solution. What are the solutions? Well, you see, my group mates are going to be talking about afforestation and reforestation, and also the relocation of palm oil plants. However, I will be talking about agrarian reform. Agrarian reform is the redistribution of agricultural land or a redirection of agriculture's systems. This helps to give power back to more rural farmers. It creates a much more equal playing field, and these rural farmers are much more likely to implement more sustainable versions of agriculture, and it takes away power from these industrial, more polluting versions of agriculture that these corporation giants are going to implement within their own land. But here's how it helps specifically through the lens of politics, ethics, and environment. The politics aspect. You see, agrarian reform often requires governmental action by directly supporting farmers, usually through a financial incentive or financial gain, or through land redistribution by creating a much more equal playing field and making it easier for rural farmers to gain access to land, or they can change how land tenure is given and gained. One example of this would be the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, which was established in the Philippines, and it redistributes land from eligible landowners, which are people who have their land devoted to crop cultivation, livestock and poultry, or fisheries. They also have to have their land above a certain size, which is usually about 5 hectares, and also their land can be occupied by tenants or not. This land these eligible landowners own are given to qualified beneficiaries, which are people who are landless farmer or farm worker, and they must be tied to the land in some sort of way. They must also be engaged in farming or farming related activities, and must also live within the area that the land is located. And the CARP has helped redistribute 4.8 million hectares of agricultural land to about 3.9 million agrarian reform beneficiaries, which has created a much more equitable and much more equal space for rural farmers to be able to produce their own agricultural products. Another government-run program is the Timber Stand Improvement Program, or the TSI, which is run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And what they do is they aim to cut much more poorly formed trees to allow much bigger and healthier trees to grow, creating much healthier forests. This helps to cut down on the effects of wildfires by creating much more less densely packed forests, and it helps to improve the soil quality and improve the plants that can grow on it. And because the forests are much more durable, it creates a much healthier environment for animals. The ethics aspect. The landless worker movement is a social movement in Brazil that provides more than 17 million acres of land for 1.5 million people, all those people being marginalized, poor, or landless people, and it helps these people who usually don't have access to these kinds of things. They take land that is being underutilized or unused and giving it to people who need it the most. They also provide training, legal assistance, and other kinds of support directly to these people and help them to use their lands in much better ways. They promote sustainable agricultural practice founded on the principles of agroecology, which are focused on much more traditional styles of agriculture, which are oftentimes much more sustainable and work in harmony with the environment. And these rural farmers are much more likely to use these kind of traditional methods because they are much more familiar with these kinds of methods, or it's much more attainable for them to use them. The environment aspect. The Conservation Research Program, the CRP, is a program in the United States that pays farmers to take environmentally sensitive land, that being land with poor soil quality, water quality, or air quality, and it pays these landowners to take that land out of agricultural production. They stop producing their crops and plant species that are much more beneficial and help improve those aspects of that land. It prevented an estimated 1.8 billion tons of soil erosion. It has created that land to be much more healthier and much more stable soil. It has also established more than 2.7 million hectares of wildlife habitat, creating much more space and biodiversity for animals to live inside of. These lands can also sequester more than 33 million metric tons of carbon per year, which helps directly impact the climate change aspect of things. Here are the steps we've taken locally. So the Conservation Research Program financially incentivizes landowners to use their land more environmentally friendly. It helps them to improve the overall quality of their land by planting crops that are much more beneficial and create habitats for animals and improve the soil quality and the water quality and things like that. The Forest Service's Timber Stand Improvement Program, or the TSI, helps to reduce wildfires by creating much more densely packed forests. It improves the health of these forests by creating much healthier trees, much larger trees, which can therefore take in much more carbon and improve the soil around it. And this creates much more durable habitats for animals to live inside of, therefore increasing the biodiversity of these lands. There are also steps taken globally. Brazil's landless workers movement gives land to the poorer and more rural farmers, people who are marginalized and don't have access to these kinds of things. And it helps promote agroecology, which are much more sustainable versions of agriculture, much more traditional. And it helps these farmers directly to be more sustainable and to use their land effectively. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program of the Philippines, it not only gives power back to these rural farmers, but it helps keep agricultural industry giants in check to keep them from abusing the land that they have and the power that they have over these people, and it gives that back to these rural farmers. And this helps to relieve pressure of turning natural ecosystems into agricultural land, because these rural farmers can then just use the land that these industry giants would have just kind of left behind or abused and used incorrectly. Why agrarian reform? See, agrarian reform gives power back to the poor and landless, and it limits the extensive abuse of power that agricultural giants could have. It helps those that need it and gives them ability and resources to create much more sustainable forms of agriculture. It promotes much more sustainable forms of agriculture. It helps these people to create an environment that harmonizes with the environment around them and keeps that production for the future. It also addresses much greater issues beyond just deforestation. It addresses issues of inequality between the poorer and the agricultural giants, and also just natural ecosystems as a whole. Water quality, soil erosion, things like that are also being addressed by agrarian reform. This is the resources that I used. Thank you.